Du Fu, the pitiful young prince. Hooded crows fly at night over the walls of Chang'an, uttering harsh cries above welcoming autumn gate. Then head for people's houses, pecking at the lofty roofs beneath which high officials scurry to escape barbarians. The golden whip is broken in two. The 9 horses are run to death. But it is still not possible for all of royal blood to flee together. Wearing in plain sight at his waist precious pendants of jade and coral, the pitiful prince stands weeping at the corner of the road. When I ask, he refuses to tell either name or surname. He only speaks of his desperation and begs to become my slave. For 100 days now he has lain hidden in brambles. There is no whole skin left on his entire body. But the sons and grandsons of Gaozu all have the same noses. The dragon seed naturally differs from that of ordinary men. Jackals and wolves rule the city. The dragons hide in the wilds. The prince had better take care of that 1,000-tile body. I don't dare talk long here, in plain view by the crossroads, but for the sake of my prince, I will stay for a moment. Last night the east wind blew in the stench of blood, and camels from the east filled the former capital. The Shuofang veterans were known as skilled warriors. They always seemed so fierce, but now how foolish they look. It is rumored that the Son of Heaven has already abdicated, but also that the Uyghur Han has vowed his loyalty, that his men gashed their faces and begged to wipe out this disgrace. Say nothing. Someone else may be hiding and listening. Alas, Prince, you must be careful. Stay on guard, and may the spirits of the 5 tombs watch over you always. So we have the last of Du Fu's ballads and the last of the ballads in this volume and in this section. And The Pitiful Young Prince is a very similar ballad, and in a way it's a continuation of the 2 previous ones that we've already read by Du Fu. Remember, Du Fu's ballads are characterized by a couple of features. The main one is that they deal with contemporary issues, which was a bit of an innovation for Fu ballads at this time of the Tang Dynasty. And what more contemporary events and what better subject matter than the An Lushan Rebellion? In the An Lushan Rebellion, a massive army gathered against the empire, rebelled, and they managed to take the 2 capitals, including the main capital, Chang'an. In the previous poem, beside Serpentine Lake, we had a man lamenting the troubled times and the presence of the barbarians in the capital. This could be a continuation. This could be another anecdote, another scene of Chang'an under the barbarian occupation. So the poem is pretty straightforward, although it does have some cryptic references that might need clarification. But as you can see, it's the story of a young prince, a member of the Imperial dynasty, a member of the Imperial family, not one of the important members, and he has been left behind when the emperor and his cortege of ministers left the capital in all haste because the barbarians were about to arrive. This little prince was left behind. He is under threat of death. Should he be discovered by the usurpers, by the rebels, he will most certainly be executed. And this probably is based on a real incident, or at least an incident that Du Fu heard of while he was in the capital under the barbarian occupation. I doubt this is a personal experience that the speaker is Du Fu. Some critics would say that the attitude of the poetic persona towards the prince is a bit frivolous and not altogether as loyal as it should be. So it probably does not represent Du Fu, but it represents maybe a story he heard of some imperial princess hiding. And it very well collects the tragic pathos of this time through a young person who is innocent of any wrongdoing, but who is in danger of his life and who went from riches to rags. So, what are the parts of the poem? Um, I would say basically the poem has two parts. So it has one first part which narrates the situation, the background, the discovery of the prince by a person, and then the second part is the speech, the dialogue that the poetic persona has with the young prince after seeing him and recognizing him for what he is. And the main themes of the poem, well, it's pretty narrative, and in the ballad style, for example, that introduction of dialogue is very typical of ballads. So the topic is the An Lushan rebellion, really, the fall of the capital under the barbarians and the miseries that followed. And here specifically, the misery is the suffering of one member of the imperial clan. And I suppose you could mention other minor topics, for example, the cowardice of the ministers who ran away quite quickly without bothering to check that all the members of the imperial family had gone away, the suffering of the innocent people, and the fear of betrayal, the cowardliness of the Chinese troops that should have defended the empire. But that's all related, or they're all sub themes of the An Lushan rebellion main theme. So let's check the poem as usual, couplet by couplet, and clarifying any doubts. Hooded crows fly at night over the walls of Chang'an, uttering harsh cries above welcoming autumn gate. So hooded crows refers to white-headed crows. They were a very, very ill omen when many centuries before the Tang, one of the generals of the corresponding dynasty, I think it was the Eastern Jin, I'm not completely sure, Ho Jing, the general Ho Jing, tried a rebellion and to depose the Imperial House. Presumably, white hooded crows were seen, and they were an omen of his imminent failure. So the appearance of this bird over the walls of Chang'an is a prelude, is a symbol of ill things to come. And they cry above Welcoming Autumn Gate. Welcoming Autumn Gate was one of the gates in the west of the city. So these crows are probably prefiguring or anticipating the escape of the emperor and the nobility from the capital in the aftermath of the rebellion and the arrival of the rebels into the capital area. So the crows are over the gate, then head for people's houses, pecking at the lofty roofs. Roofs beneath which high officials scurry to escape barbarians. The golden whip is broken in two, the 9 horses are run to death. But it is still not possible for all of royal blood to flee together. So the people who dwell in this house and in the other houses, all the aristocrats and the royals, run shamelessly and quite quickly and without taking any consideration for anybody else. They kill horses by running them to death in their haste to flee from the capital, and they break the whips because they're hitting the horses so hard that, the whips break. Apart from being quite a vivid image, this is again a reference to an episode in previous Chinese history, which, it's not particularly relevant to understand or enjoy the poem, but it is a reference, which, Du Fu is quite a cultured poet that is always inserting references. This one is to one of the emperors of the Western Han Dynasty when he was called to assume the throne. He I'm not sure if they died, but he galloped and exchanged at least 9 horses in his eagerness to reach the capital. So now the eagerness is inverse. It's not an eagerness to reach, it's an eagerness to escape the capital. So these are troubled times and cowardly times indeed. So all this introduction has set us the situation, and now we get the main topic. A prince was forgotten. with all this haste. And this was already introduced in the last line. But it is still not possible for all of royal blood to flee together. Who was left behind? Wearing in plain sight at his waist precious pendants of jade and coral, the pitiful prince stands weeping at the corner of the road. So we have to imagine a young prince, probably less than 15 years old, a child probably, and he's still wearing, and it's very dangerous, luxurious tokens of his pedigree. If he had been older or smart enough, he would probably have gotten rid of them. And he's crying in the middle of the street. When I ask, he refuses to tell either name or surname. He only speaks of his desperation and begs to become my slave. For 100 days now he has lain, hidden in brambles. There is no whole skin left on his entire body. So this prince of the royal blood is so desperate that he even begs to become the slave of another person, as long as they can take him to a home, feed him, and look after him. And he's been for 100 days, maybe that's just a round number, but probably quite realistic. So that's a period of 3 months. So making do with very little food, probably, hiding among the bushes, living a very precarious existence and trying to avoid the enemy patrols that would gladly capture him and execute him. But the sons of and grandsons of Gaozu all have the same noses. The dragon seed naturally differs from that of ordinary men. So despite his attempts at hiding, it's not only the jewels he is wearing that denote who he is. His physical appearance also gives him away as a member of the royal clan. The dragon seed, that is, emperors were associated with dragons, the dragon seed is different from ordinary men. So the poem mentions the grandsons and sons of Gaozu all have the same noses. So this is another historical reference to the Han Dynasty. The founder of the Han Dynasty, Han Gaozu, was reputed to have a very big nose, and his descendants generally inherited this character trait. So very similar to, for example, the European Habsburgs' enormous jaws, which were also a hereditary trait, which was even more developed by interbreeding, marriages of cousins with cousins for many generations. Anyway, the current dynasty is not the Han, but there was a Gaozu who was the emperor, the founder of the Tang dynasty. We have no information about him having an extraordinarily long nose, but this is a very typical element that we've encountered in ballads. So even if they are about contemporary events, some references are made to the past to couch, to soften the criticism of contemporary event. Because remember, this poem is criticizing the policies, if not of the emperor, at least of some of the courtiers, the callousness of some of the members of the elite in leaving princes of the royal blood in the capital during the barbarian occupation. Okay, so now begins the direct conversation of the poetic persona, who until now has been describing the scene and his thoughts. He now speaks directly to this poor prince. Jackals and wolves rule the city, the dragons hide in the wilds. The prince had better take care of that 1,000-tile body. So jackals and wolves are traditionally associated with barbarians and rebels, and dragons with the emperor. So the barbarians control the city, the royals are out of the city, and the advice is protect yourself. Your 1,000-tile body, tile was a measure of weight and coinage, I believe, perhaps employed for silver. So it's just your incredibly valuable body, prince. I don't dare talk long here, in plain view by the crossroads, but for the sake of my prince, I will stay for a moment. Now, the poetic persona is not very brave either, so perhaps one subtopic of this poem that should have been emphasized when I talked about them is cowardice, because, the cowardice is everywhere in this poem. The cowardice of the courtiers who run away, leaving the prince behind, and the cowardice of the soldiers, which is going to be mentioned in a minute, that didn't fight bravely enough, but also now the cowardice of the poetic persona himself. He is afraid of talking with the prince, with good reason. He could be executed, but if he really respects the prince, and if he's really loyal to the dynasty, it wouldn't be amiss, or it wouldn't be improper for him to try to protect the prince himself and take him into his custody. But he just tells him, hey, protect yourself, but I'm just going to chat very quickly with you and leave before they catch me talking with you. And he tells him some rumors, some information, some dispiriting, but some probably good. Last night the east wind blew in the stench of blood, and camels from the east filled the former capital. So the eastern wind is the barbarians, of course. They had established a new capital in Luoyang, which had been the eastern capital of the Han. There was where An Lushan kept his court. And his troops were sacking, dismantling everything that was of value in Chang'an, including most of its personnel. I think I mentioned when talking about the previous poem that Du Fu himself was taken to the eastern capital and forced to serve in some minor position, and many others were as well. And so the camels from the east are taking the loot and the people back east again. The Shuofang veterans were known as skilled warriors. They always seemed so fierce, but now how foolish they look. So the troops who were meant to defend the capital, they looked fiercely. Shuofang was the region just to the north of the capital, and confronting the barbarian steppe land of the northwest. But their general, Geshu Han, had been ignominiously defeated, probably not through fault of his own, but through the infighting and bickering between the Tang loyalists, and he was being kept a prisoner at the enemy's capital. So probably Du Fu is being a bit too harsh on the northern armies, but they did not manage to stop the barbarians from taking the capital. That's a fact. So, however brave they might have seemed in a time of peace, they proved to be relatively worthless in this time of war. It is rumored that the Son of Heaven has already abdicated, but also that the Uyghur Han has vowed his loyalty, that his men gashed their faces and begged to wipe out this disgrace. So rumors are rife among the capital, as is to be expected in a situation such as this. The rumor of Emperor Xuanzong's abdication has reached the capital, which is true. He abdicated, I think it was in 756, very shortly after the beginning of the rebellion, and while he was seeking refuge in Shu, he abdicated in one of his sons, who became Emperor Suzong. He was in charge of the troops of the northwest and had a court in exile in that region, and would very soon, in 757, I believe, recover the capital from the rebels. And mainly he recovered it, as it is said here, it's also another true rumor, that he managed to get the loyalty and the support, probably in exchange for outrageous amounts of money or goods. He manages to get the support of the Uyghur Han, the ruler of the Uyghur Turkic peoples of the northwest. And, we have this scene of the men gashing their faces, which was, in their ethnic group, a traditional sign of promising to do something loyally. Interestingly, the translator has here clarified and mentioned the Uyghur Han. I believe the original poem talks about the ruler of the Chanyu of the Western Turks, of the Western Xiongnu, which is again like the reference to Gaozu that we mentioned earlier on. It's an archaic reference, which was no longer contemporary in the time of Du Fu. That is, the Chanyu and the Xiongnu were the barbarians of the Han dynasty, no longer the barbarians of the Tang dynasty. Conclusion of the poem. So after having said this, the poetic persona makes short shrift and says, "Bye-bye, I'm leaving you now, Prince. Good luck to you, but I'm running away before anybody sees me talking with you. Say nothing. Someone else may be hiding and listening. Alas, Prince, you must be careful. Stay on guard, and may the spirits of the 5 tombs watch over you always." So the speaker says, okay, I'm leaving. Let the gods or your ancestors protect you. The spirits of the 5 tombs refers to, again, this is another anachronism. The five tombs, or where the Wuling, were five tumuli and towns in the outskirts of Chang'an that had been built by the emperors of the Han Dynasty. When, especially in the Western Han, when an emperor died, his tomb was placed in a mountain near the capital, and a whole town was placed around it so that the people in the town could honor and keep alive the rituals to the deceased emperor. And they were uprooted, so they didn't go voluntarily necessarily. They were taken by force. So they were taken away from the capital or from regional areas and taken to these new towns. So the five tombs acts as a metonymy or a synecdoche for the ancestors of the emperor. There were also tombs of the Han emperors close to of the Tang emperors close to the capital. So basically, the poetic persona is commending the young prince to the protection of his ancestors, if they can give any protection, and he is running away himself. So quite a dark poem, but an appropriate symbol of a dark time for Du Fu and for the empire. Yeah, with a scene of pathos, a pathetic scene of a young prince probably about to die and to be made a prisoner.